Spiritual Life Center, transforming lives as we love, serve, and remember who we are. One heart, one mind, one soul at a time.
Good evening and welcome to Wow Wednesday. Celia Coughlin-Surridge and I decided to do another conversation because we had so much fun the last time. And we're discovering that there's a lot of difference between my generation and hers as far as an understanding of metaphysical teachings. Tonight we take on the topic of healing. Now, we took a very small bite of it, obviously, because we didn't have a lot of time. But I've been in metaphysics for almost 45 years. Celia is fairly new. It was interesting for both of us to hear what the other one had to say. Her from the perspective of, I had a lot of different ways to approach it, and for her it was a brand new idea. And so sit back, enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you on the flip side.
Hi, I'm Reverend Deborah Phillips. I'm the director of the WOW program at Spiritual Life Center. And Celia, would you like to introduce yourself?
And I'm Celia Coughlin-Surridge, and I'm part of the marketing team that helps propel Spiritual Life Center out into the interwebs and the world and the universe. So glad to be here, Deborah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's glad to. Well, our last conversation was so much fun. I thought we should do it again.
Yeah, I really enjoy kind of being able to pick your brain. You know, my background is one where I'm still learning a lot, and this has been a really fun way to learn, this unplugged type of platform that quarantine has provided us. So it's enjoyable.
It has actually offered us some opportunities, hasn't it?
It has. It's really fun to see what everyone's doing during this time of quarantine. And I think also what's really great is that people are having this opportunity to actually really connect and dive into these questions that before our busy life may not have actually allowed us to really explore. So I think it's a period of time in our lives where we actually get to stop and, you know, smell the roses, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Or even find the roses.
Where do they grow? I don't know.
Heard about them. Oh, they really exist.
Well, yeah. So you had actually approached me about talking about the healing process. And I was super game for the conversation because I was like, there is a healing process. What is it? I don't know. So I'm starting totally at ground zero with this topic. You know, early on when I started going to Spiritual Life Center, you know, there was conversations, and I remember I can't remember if it was a workshop or what, but there was definitely a conversation of, you know, getting past physical pain. But you know, I really feel like we haven't really talked about it recently, and now is a time to be thinking about our own personal healing. So I guess my first question that I'd like to ask you is that when we're talking about this healing process, you know, are we talking about mental, physical? Is it a little bit of both? If you could elaborate on when we're talking about healing, like, so actually maybe the first question is, do you believe that we have the ability to heal ourselves without medicine, if you will?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the way Unity started was Myrtle Fillmore, who was married to Charles Fillmore, went to a lecture. Now, she had TB. Almost every woman in her family had died from TB. This was in the late 1800s. And she went to this lecture, and this person talked about the fact that God is within. And somehow it really resonated with her. It's like, you know, that moment where you really take something in. And she walked out of the lecture and she said, well, if God is within me, then I can't be sick because God can't be sick.
Right.
It was that simple for her. And she was healed, and she expected to die from TB, and she didn't. And so then they started, a healing ministry. I don't think they intended to start a ministry, but they started doing healing circles and using the healing of mental, God is within me, prayer work, and many, many people were healed. And it was a very, very strong practice. And unity comes out of, it comes out of a healing teaching, a healing, you might have to edit this a little bit, Cameron. It comes out of a discipline, a healing discipline. And so that was the primary reason for Unity starting in the first place. Remember, there were no drugs for TB back then, and that was the disease everyone was dying from. And then as we've gone along over the years, we've had antibiotics and there's, things. And so while we still teach healing, at some point, and I'm guessing, and I don't know for sure, is that probably during the Depression, we kind of shifted over into prosperity teaching. Mm-hmm. And there's still a lot of people who do healing, and you will hear people who say people were praying for me and I was healed. And and normally, yes, when we talk about healing, most of the time we go to the physical part of it. But what Myrtle Fillmore taught us was it was all about how she was thinking about it. Right. Because she went into that lecture thinking that she was going to die from TB because everybody else in her family had, or all the women had. And she walked out of there with, oh, God is in me. In every single cell, God can't be sick, so I can't be sick. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't instantaneous. I mean, she worked with it. She really worked to get that into her consciousness. So it's all about consciousness.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously there's this consciousness side, and we as a human race have become very conscious of the food that we're putting into our bodies. But would you say that it's kind of like a multifaceted approach where, it's mental and physical that you put in as well? It's kind of like a maybe vibrational even?
Oh, it's all of those different levels, which is why it takes a lot of work to learn how to do this. Some people have instantaneous healings, don't get me wrong, but to maintain this everyday health and well-being, it is a way of life. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of being. Mm-hmm. And, Bruce Lipton has a book called The Biology of Belief, and he went against every practically biologist in the world, saying that our cells work from the outside in, they don't work from the inside out, and that everything that the cell is doing hits the outer layer, and it is responding to everything in our environment. So he has proven it scientifically, while the Fillmores and Ernest Holmes and all of those people just knew, and they took it from the perspective that God is in us, and God can't be sick, so we can't be sick. Mm-hmm. We can be, and there is a difference between curing and healing as well. Mm-hmm. So someone could have a physical ailment, and you can cure that, but they might still have emotional, psychological, spiritual issues. Or you could have someone who is physically very ill. They could have emotional, psychological, spiritual healing, and they could still die. Mm-hmm. So it's very important to know that difference as well. Mm-hmm. But it's really comes down to is balance.
Right. Yeah, actually, it's a common discussion, I think, recently, especially pre-COVID, which was that, stress, overworking yourself, and having that like negative vibrations, negative feelings, and being worried all of the time was actually contributing to people developing cancers and other really serious diseases. So you're also kind of talking about how, if maybe you don't necessarily feel like you need to heal a specific issue, but you realize that mentally you need to be healthier to prevent these issues down the road. This is what this healing process is really all about, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Is keeping yourself in balance so that, excuse me, what you eat, what you think, what you do, the people you spend time with, because there are people who are toxic.
Yeah.
And so it's about being, and it's about awareness. It's just about being present and aware of what you're doing with yourself. I mean, think about this. I'm sure that you have been in a situation or sat in a room with people and you feel really good and it's really fun. And then there's other times when you've been sitting in a room and your stomach is like turning into knots and all you want to do is leave.
Yeah.
And that has, and it's because probably negativity is prevalent in the room. You can feel it in your body when it's not right for you.
Right.
And if you do enough of that, your body will get sick.
Yeah.
You are exposing your body to toxins. They just happen to be energetic toxins.
Right. Yeah.
So
Totally. So when somebody is interested in diving into this, where would you suggest be like ground zero? Where do we start?
well, there's a gazillion books written on it, obviously. Also going into somewhere like SLC or someone who does that, that does real healing work, not people who, proclaim themselves to be the healer of the century, but there are people who quietly do healing work or they do healing prayer. Prayer groups are, especially in the metaphysical community, are a really good way. And just the Fillmore material is written in an older language, so a lot of people have trouble with it. But there's a lot of other books who are written out of Unity and religious science that talk about this process. But it's really about if you learn how to simply be in the moment and start to be aware of how you feel, what your body feels like in any situation. So like if you go do something and you walk away and even the next day you feel icky, then something was going on that wasn't good for you. Or I mean, of course, that could be in a person's everyday life as well. Mm-hmm. And there's just also yes, we can be exposed to all kinds of different elements out there. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to get it. Mm-hmm. We don't have to agree to get it, but that's a consciousness thing that takes a lot of practice. Mm-hmm. I remember when I went back to the Episcopal Church for a while I was trying to figure out what to do when I grew up. And I haven't figured that out yet, but there was a place in the service where people would come to the front of the church and it was birthdays, anniversaries, and Thanksgivings. And a woman stood up and she gave thanks for successful cancer surgery. Mm. Now I was metaphysician. I had just kind of gone back to this church for a while. And I remember it went through my head, the way she said it, I realized that she believed in cancer more than she believed in God. Mm. So it's really about what you give your power to, what you give your energy to. Right. And of course, cancer is a lot scarier than God. Yeah. And when you're frightened, you're going to put your energy into what you're frightened of. Right? So it's like trying to turn that around, and you don't pretend like it's not there. You don't pretend like you don't hurt. You don't pretend like there is not a diagnosis. You don't pretend any of that, but you deny that it has power over you. And then you start doing your affirmations. And denial and affirmation is actually a very formal process. I had a friend once ask me, and she was very serious about this, and she said, I always put something about this isn't going to affect me in my affirmations. And somebody told me that you should never, ever, ever put something negative in your affirmations. And I did what a good friend would do, and I just started to laugh. And she said, okay, and she relaxed. And I said, that the whole thing is about not giving the negative power over you. You acknowledge it, you say, I see you, but that is you're not what has power in my life.
Right.
God, the spirit, whatever you call the energy that has us going, that keeps us alive, that's what has the power, and then you give the power to that. And it's a seesaw. I mean, you're going back and forth,
Right.
because you're having to keep going back and doing that denialist, I don't give you power.
Right. For me, something that's really struck me is at one point in time, Oprah had an aha moment, which was that forgiveness is really letting go of that wanting to change the past, that a lot of times you hold on to something because really deep down you're wanting to change it in some way, shape, or form, and you may not be able to. And so it actually sounds like, to me, this healing process is really kind of stemming from that too, that it's kind of like forgiveness for some things, and that if you start down this road of healing, you may end up finding that there are things about it's really a self process of things that you need to change. It's not external, that you may be unhappy with your job, or you may be unhappy with your weight, or you may be in physical pain, but it seems like it's really reflection on yourself to move forward. That seems like the first step, right?
Well, that is, because there's really, when everything that we teach, anything, the prayer work, the affirmation work, all of that, none of that is to change the external world. It's all to change you. It's all to change you from the inside out. And the past, I guess the reason mindfulness is such a big deal right now is it's a way to try to get people to come and be aware of what's going on right now. And I've had 2 or 3 people tell me that Westerners really don't use mindfulness the way they do, from where it came from. But becoming aware of what's going on in the present right now. And there's an example I've used several times, and people have heard it from me. But when I got married, and it wasn't a very long marriage, but I was working in a bank, and I had to wear pantyhose. This was back in the 70s. And pantyhose were completely unreliable back then. And this person I was married to was really upset that I was having to buy pantyhose. We divorced. I got remarried, and I found myself asking my husband permission to buy pantyhose. And he looked at me like I was completely insane. And I realized in that moment that I wasn't talking to him. I was talking to the other person. I was still in that other mindset. And so that conversation I was having, I wasn't having it with my husband. I was having it with the ex-husband. And if you really start to think about the conversations that you have with people, we're talking a lot at SLC about being triggered. The triggers are, it's like, I have to stop and think, okay, who am I talking to? Because there used to be a person that was exactly like my sister, and she would do things that really triggered me. And I had to learn to stop and go, oh, okay, I'm not talking to my sister. And that wasn't so much about forgiveness as it was simply learning who I was talking to in the moment and figuring out that their motivation might be completely different. But I was running off of experience. We all run off of experience. We run off of what we were told. We run off of experience. And the forgiveness is really about letting go. I stopped forgiving other people years ago. Now I simply forgive myself for attracting it, or I forgive myself for participating in it, and I have found that when I go from that perspective, it's much easier to let go. But if you've had a traumatic experience in your life, and that keeps replaying in your head, that can definitely take a toll on your on your well-being on all levels. And if it's toxic enough, it can make you physically ill. And there are people who can walk you through exercises to help you release those. And yeah, you can do that by yourself, but a lot of times if it's been really a trauma, you just need someone to walk through it with you.
Right.
It's because we're not meant to do all of this by ourselves.
I think it's really terrifying for people actually to have to go to somebody else for something like that. I mean, my father passed away when I was 19, and that's kind of like, I feel like a recurring story, but that's a life-changing event. It defines who I've become. And, I'm better at talking about it, but going through an emotional process of healing or talking to somebody about it, it's terrifying. And so it takes a lot of guts for sure to go down this path. When you talk about exercises that people can do, I presume that you may have a few up your sleeve.
I do, and there was one in particular that I wanted to share with you today, but I wanted to go back for just a moment. One of the reasons that it is so terrifying to go to someone else and try to walk through that experience to release it, is that it's so painful that on some level we feel like that pain's going to kill us.
Yeah.
And so if I go and intentionally allow myself to have that much pain, I don't think I'll survive it. And what happens, of course, is it's painful for the moment when you're walking through the healing process or the releasing process, but then you're free. But the fear of that much emotional pain is what keeps people stuck. So just as an aside. So, but healing techniques, I mean, you can go to people, there's Reiki and there's all this laying on of hands thing. Unity actually teaches that we should be doing it ourselves. And the most extreme, of course, is Christian Science, where they don't believe you should have anybody help you at all. It should all come from your own mind. And then we're a little more relaxed on that. But at the same time, it's like, get yourself strong enough. But we also are here to help each other. One of my favorite quotes from the Bible is from James, where it says, are any of you sick? Let us know and we will pray with you. We need each other. And so while we're working on increasing our own consciousness, we also, can rely on each other to help. And Willie Nelson has a great song. It's called I've Been Too Sick to Pray. And it says, hey, Lord, you haven't heard from me for a while. The family's good, but I've just been too sick to pray. It's a great little song.
I'll have to look that up. That might be before my time.
Well, no, actually, it's not that old, but it probably wasn't one of his biggest hits either. It's on his album called Spirit. But anyway, so I was working with somebody one day, and I was actually doing Reiki, but this doesn't require any of that. And I just got into this space of really love welling up from my heart. And I think the best way to describe, say, a new mom is when you probably look at your baby and there's this huge well of love that comes up. And I was working with her, and there was a spot, she had a thing on her lung, I think, and I just started focusing, and I just kept saying, I love you. And I wasn't consciously saying the words, I love you, like I love you. It was coming from that space of feeling so warm. And something left her body. I felt it leave her body. And I thought that was pretty cool. But I also sort of thought it might be a one-off. About a year later, I didn't really have opportunity to use it. About a year later, I had oral surgery. And I was lying in bed, and I didn't want to take any really strong pain medication. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and this nerve was just screaming its brains out, if a nerve has brains. And it was just, and I laid there, and I managed to get into that love space. And I started talking to the nerve, and I just kept saying, I love you. I love you. And I'll be darned if it didn't stop. It settled completely down.
Wow.
So what I want to do is take you through the process of first getting into that space of feeling that love.
Mm-hmm.
And then, picking, and all of you who are watching us, pick a small thing that's going on. Don't pick the biggest, worst thing that, and you can do this with a situation. You can do it with something physical. But you always start small, because you need practice at this. And there will be times you can sit down and you can generate this heart feeling. And there will be times when you're just not in the space to do it as well. So, keep that in mind. Don't put too much pressure on your face. So go ahead, Celia, and just close your eyes, take a breath. Now, as you breathe into your heart center and find a way to generate this incredible feeling of love. For you, it might be thinking of George. For other people, their children, their pets, anything that can help you relax into that space of feeling pure love without thinking about it. And continue to breathe. And this feeling should well up in your chest, in your heart center. And then as you breathe, encompass or fill up your entire body. And now think of something that's going on in your body that you want to relax or you want to heal. If it's a pain, actually talk to the nerve. Whittle it down to the smallest thing that you can and say, I love you. And send this warm feeling with your words. I love you. Pouring this energy, caressing, loving this spot, this thing. Just love it. Love it with everything you have. And you continue to do that until you feel relief, until you feel relaxed. We'll take just a moment in silence. Channeling the love. Now take a breath, take another breath. One more time, inform this area of your body that it is loved. Take another breath and bring yourself back when you can.
Wow. It's so interesting because it's like I felt the warm sensation start to kick in.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and the day that I did it with the nerve, I was actually somehow able to, it was like I was having a personal conversation with that one nerve.
Yeah.
And partly because it was so, it had been an extraction. So this nerve was just like, ah.
Yeah.
So I was very much able to connect with it. And if you can generate that energy and then also that connection with that particular whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
you can do it with circumstances too. But obviously, we're in an era where I personally believe that it's time for us to turn back to natural, that's not the right word, to healing, to metaphysical healing again, because we are getting to the point where many drugs don't work on us anymore, or they make us sicker than we were in the first place. And things are coming along, like notice some the circumstances we're in now, the reason we're doing this.
Yeah.
And if we learn to heal again, it's been generous. I don't know how many years that so much focus has been on prosperity, which is also important. But healing was what started unity, religious science, divine science, all of the metaphysical churches that came out of the healing tradition. And we need to learn it again. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally understand. It's interesting. My husband and I were just having this conversation. Traditional church, if you will, like Christianity, et cetera, really when you look at it, you take the emotions and take your personal feelings out of it. If you look at it, the service that they provide people is a comfort and the ability to surrender to something that's greater to them, whether or not you believe in it, that's not the discussion. The reason why it's important is because we as human beings need to feel comfort, and we need to feel as if we can trust in something greater than us. That is an inherent need that we actually need to have. And you're healthier in the long run if you have something like that for yourself. And so that's the interesting thing about, I think, where we're at with Spiritual Life Center in this conversation is that we're actually entering into a generation where the cookie cutter church is not as popular, and the universal intelligence that we're talking about, that's part of the Unity Worldwide Ministries, that's what's kind of becoming popular. Not that it needs to be in the confines of a church, but that it can happen at any time, at any place, and can be lived however you want. I mean, you have people who have personal spiritual rituals that say, this is the reason why I've been successful. And then you have these healing stories, and it's multifaceted in a way. So yeah, I mean, it makes such great sense to me, even though it's new. And I thank you so much for sharing it, and I'm glad that we're bringing it in such a different light to people, because I think this allows people to feel like they're having the conversation with us and kind of going along with all of it. So from here, let's say somebody wants to dive in this even further, take it to the next level. Are you the type of person that believes that we should set up kind of like a daily schedule of healing in order for this to really work in the long run? I'm familiar with people who are like, I wake up and I have a specific self-care routine every morning, and that's what helps center me for this healing process. What is your suggestion moving forward?
I have to say that the experts, I'm not part of them, the experts will say that you should meditate at the same time every day. You should have this daily process. That works for some people, but not everybody is built to do it that way. And so what I say is find your discipline, find your own discipline, and find what works for you, and do that. So the people who get up in the morning and I'm going to go meditate, I'm going to drink my coffee and meditate for an hour or 15 minutes, good for them. And then the people who, like, I drag myself out of bed and somewhere during the day I'll sit down and get quiet. That works for them. It's all about consciousness. It's all about your consciousness and what you're doing to grow your consciousness, which is not really, it's more like opening up your consciousness. It's really not growing. It's already all there. And keep in mind that the Fillmores never intended to start a church. They started a healing ministry, and they were happy with that. And then what happened was people of like mind, because I think they were Methodists or something. But people who liked this, like minds, wanted to come together. And so it just sort of started happening. And then somehow it turned into a church. And there were people who were after Charles Fillmore to make a statement of belief, and they wanted him to say, this is what we believe, and he didn't want to do it because he says it's going to continue to change as I evolve, it will change. And so he did one with some sort of caveat because it was like, so we weren't intended to be a formal church anyway. And when you think about this in terms of consciousness, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together, and yes, we need each other, but we don't necessarily need to have the formal church. I mean, I think
Right.
formal church is fun, but it's mostly because of the music. So
shout out to Paula, right?
yeah, shout out to Paula and her team. Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, I seriously cannot wait for the day that we can go back into the facility in a safe environment, of course. Because I think, part of this healing process too is acknowledging the fact that human connection and that high vibe feeling is a huge part of what makes us just human in general, and just like you started out this conversation, you feed off of the people that you're around. And so if you're around toxic people, you're going to be filled with toxic feelings. And so surrounding yourself with happy people that fulfill you is going to help this whole process all the way through.
So there are people who can walk through a storm of toxic people and those like they're spiritually Teflon. I would love to get to that place.
I would say that James could possibly fill that role. I've seen him walk through some pretty wealthy fields of toxic people, and he comes out unscathed. So
I mean, and as you get more practice, it's like for me now, I will definitely feel it. But then I will realize after the fact that I feel really pretty horrible. And then I will sit down and meditate, I will take measures, and then I will clear my energies.
Right.
But we resonate. Really, the truth is we resonate with each other. It's not like I pick up or you don't dump your negative energy on me. It's like we're all bells. So if one bell is ringing and I'm up next to you, we resonate.
Right.
So
exactly.
You're ringing, and so I need to keep my consciousness at a point where I'm ringing at a higher vibration than you are.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Do we have any other? Maybe when we get back into the sanctuary, maybe a couple of healing classes on Wednesday night would be helpful.
I think so. Yeah. Cause I think this really opens up a conversation and other things. I mean, there's, obviously there are books. I'm sure that you've got a few that you could suggest. Then there's, the Heal documentary that it came out a couple of years ago. And so, it's a topic that people are really wanting to learn more about. So I think that it would be great to have this as kind of an open series.
Well, we'll look at that when we get back into the good old sanctuary.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Celia, for coming to play with me.
Thank you for letting me ask questions. I love it.
Welcome. Got to keep this going generation to generation.
And that's our bite-sized introduction into healing. Celia asked a very important question. She asked, is it true that we can heal ourselves? And I said, yes, we can. There are people out there who are purists who will say, well, no, we are not doing the healing. It is the God within that does the healing. However, keep in mind that until we have the consciousness where we are aware that the God within is with us and can help heal us, we can't heal ourselves. And so it is a joint venture. It is not simply us with our minds healing ourselves. It is not simply God healing us without our participation. We have to agree to this. And the way we agree to it is to become aware of the fact that we are not just physical beings. We are spiritual beings as well. And yes, it takes study. It takes becoming aware. It takes meditation. It takes prayer. It takes simply becoming aware of who you really are, which is a spiritual being having a physical experience. And once you become aware of that, then more things are possible. So I really enjoyed my conversation with Celia, and it gave me some ideas for some future wows where we can delve into the idea of metaphysical healing more deeply. So stay tuned, and I wish you the best, and may the joys of the world go with you. Good night.
Spiritual Life Center, transforming lives as we love, serve, and remember who we are. One heart,